Hey, everyone. What is going on? Lauren Sisler here with AL.com. We are cruising into week 5 of the SEC college football season. So guess what? We've got SEC Insider with you, brought to you by All South Appliance Group. And here to chat today, our lovely friend, Mr. Matt Zenitz. What's going on, Matty?
What's up, dude?
Good to see you as always, even from virtually. Always nice to catch up with you and, of course, get some scoop from you on various things happening, obviously, at Alabama, Auburn, and around the SEC. And so let's start off the top. We'll talk about Alabama. Heading into week 5, 4 games, Mac Jones, pretty impressive quarterback. So the question is, could Alabama soon have its first Heisman-winning quarterback in Mac Jones? I want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, through the first month of SEC play, can make a strong case that he's playing as well as any quarterback in the country. So Alabama at this point, number 1 among Power 5 teams in total offense. Mac Jones, number 1 among Power 5 quarterbacks in passing yards per game, somewhere in the 380 yards per game range. And the conductor of an offense that, if you listen to Jeremy Pruitt this week, looks like maybe the best, most potent offense of his lifetime based on how he was presenting things. So through 4 games, obviously it's still early, but through 4 games, you can make a strong case that Mac Jones is as deserving as anybody of being in that conversation. And also that he's looking, at least right now, like he could maybe be, at least from a statistical perspective and things along those lines, like last year's Heisman winner, Mr. Joe Burrow from LSU. You could see him, based on how the year's going and obviously the weapons he has around him and how he's playing, ending up the year with maybe a similar stat line as what Joe Burrow had last year. And maybe, fortunately for Alabama, maybe a similar result also in terms of where they finish as a team.
Yeah, and I'm curious to know, real quick before we hop over to the next question, when you kind of look at the landscape of the season, Alabama, playing obviously 10 SEC games, so it's all conference games. Do you think that if it were any other year, do you think the fact that they're playing such a tough schedule, obviously in the SEC, that essentially this helps his chances because of what he's able to put out there on paper and on the field every single week based on sort of this, the landscape that we're looking at being different during this pandemic?
That definitely helps his chances because it's not like he's going out and putting up these numbers against Campbell University or the Citadel. He's doing it against Georgia, which last week, heading into last week's game, was ranked number 1 in the country. And I think if you still talk to people now, you would still hear people in the football world and the coaching world refer to this as still arguably the best defense in the country. And against that defense, Mac Jones led the way for an offensive performance for Alabama where they put up in excess of 550 yards of total offense against a defense that going into that game had allowed less than 250 yards per game for the year. So one of the great numbers from that game is that Georgia, through its first 3 games, had only allowed 3 touchdowns on defense total through 3 games. And for Alabama, Mac Jones led the way for an offense that put up 5 touchdowns in that 1 game alone.
And it looks like Tamika Craig agreeing with you. She thinks the all SEC schedule will definitely help him. And, of course, it seems like our Alabama fans chiming in feel like he's got a good shot at winning the Heisman Trophy based on the points that you made there. Now, flipping to the Auburn side of things, is there concern about their quarterback and Bo Nix and obviously what he's been able to put out there on the field and on paper this year, obviously 4 games in? The hope transitioning from freshman to sophomore year is that, you see some growth and maturity. But, I think unfortunately we've also seen a quarterback that has taken a few steps back in some ways, and maybe really just his poise and really the chemistry that we're seeing from this Auburn offense. Just want to get your thoughts 4 weeks in heading into week 5 now.
Simply put, they need better play from Bo Nix if they're going to be able to salvage this season and have any sort of respectable year. So they headed this week at risk of falling under 500. Obviously, that would be a really less than ideal spot for them to be in as a team. And they need him to be at a level where he's better than what he's been these last 3 weeks specifically, where total these last 3 weeks has 1 touchdown and 3 interceptions. And in 2 of those 3 games finished with less than 180 yards passing. And then last week, even though he finished with a higher total, somewhere in the 275 range, it took close to 50 pass attempts to get there, and obviously had some issues during the course of that game. So if you talk to people in the Auburn world, it seems like he's pressing a little bit right now, and just needs to get to a level where he's playing a little bit better, like I said, simply put, than what he's looked like specifically these last 3 games after getting off to at least a solid start to the year against Kentucky.
No doubt. And I think going into this matchup with Ole Miss, I was talking to Cole Kubelik about it earlier. He's actually going to be covering that game with SEC Network and really feels pretty confident that that there's a game to be played with Auburn right now to try to get that confidence back, to really build things up and start to kind of move in a positive direction. Ole Miss is a good team and maybe an evenly matched team for them to be able to do that against. So I think that this weekend can definitely show us a lot, and maybe they can get back to that, explosive offense, being able to run the football better, obviously be able to get some of those explosive plays, turn those into points, and certainly be able to, kind of reestablish its offensive identity.
I do think that you're going to see them use the running game to maybe take some pressure off Bo even more. So one of the bright spots for Auburn during the course of these last couple of weeks has been the emergence of freshman running back Tank Bixby, who looks like very much a rising star for them and has obviously done some great things. And it seems like there could be more of an emphasis moving forward to showcasing him more, which in turn, if you get the kind of production that I think he's capable of out of him, then could help to take some pressure off of Bo Nix. But I was talking to former Auburn quarterback Jason Campbell this week, and obviously Auburn is coached, or Tank Bixby's position group is coached by one of Jason's old teammates, Cadillac Williams, who was a great player, running back for Auburn. And the comparison that Jason threw out for Tank Bixby was Cadillac Williams, that Tank reminds him a lot of Cadillac and what he looked like as a freshman back when they were there at Auburn together in the early 2000s.
Yeah, no doubt. Good stuff there. Now, last question for you. Let's broaden the scope a little bit here. We'll talk about the SEC. Biggest surprise so far through 4 weeks of SEC play to you, Matt?
In terms of overall stuff, I'll actually limit it to just stuff last week with week 4 of SEC play. So we were just talking about the team that Auburn's going to play this week in terms of Ole Miss, which through 3 weeks had been as good as any team in the SEC and one of the better teams nationally in terms of their offense. And last week had a significant setback. So they lose to Arkansas 33-21. And during the course of that game, after having the huge offensive performance that they did against Alabama, were put up 48 points and the highest single game yardage total that Alabama had ever given up, get held to the 21 points by Barry Odom and that Arkansas defense. So a definite setback for them. Actually going into that game, only had 1 turnover as a team for the year through 3 games and had 7 against Arkansas alone. And then their quarterback, Matt Corral, who, we talked about Mac Jones, but we look at Matt Corral also, and through 3 weeks was right at the top of the list in terms of quarterback play, not only in the SEC, but nationally. And he definitely had a setback of his own during the course of that game against Arkansas, where after going into that game, having thrown for, I want to say, more than 320 yards in each of the first 3 games, got held to only 200 yards against Arkansas through the air, and was responsible for 6 of those 7 turnovers, had 6 interceptions during the course of that game. So I'm sure they're going to be looking for some sort of bounce back performance from him against Auburn. But that's something else definitely worth keeping an eye on going into this game, is that Ole Miss offense that was so great and so productive through the first 3 games, that they definitely had a big setback against Arkansas last week, and are now going to be looking to be able to bounce back and get back to what they look like those first 3 games starting this week.
Yeah, and I got to be honest with you. If there's one word to encapsulate what we've seen so far during this SEC college football slate, the word wonky comes to mind. Things have been quite wonky lately. I talked to Roy Philpott on SiriusXM yesterday, and that was the word that we were kind of throwing back and forth. Things are just, it's different every week. You kind of just don't know what you're going to get. And it's
weird, unpredictable.
So unpredictable. And that's just been the storyline of 2020, right? Yeah. It fits the narrative really well. Hey, we appreciate the insight, Matt Zenitz. Thank you for joining us on SEC Insider. And we also want to thank our sponsors, All South Appliance Group, proud sponsor of SEC Insider, inviting you to visit us online at myallsouth.com or at any one of our showrooms across Alabama, Tennessee, and